This is the Recruit the Employer podcast, and you're listening to episode 105, What It's Really Like to Launch a Startup with the Muse co-founder, Alex Cavalaucos. Welcome to the Recruit the Employer podcast, a show for the ambitious, action-oriented career woman who wants to live out her purpose, rise to the top of her industry, and be seen as a leader at work. In 30 minutes or less, we'll walk you through the latest strategies to land your dream job, blast through imposter syndrome, and make the money you deserve. I'm your host, Jena ex-Wall Streeter turned career coach and founder of Recruit the Employer. But more importantly, I'm on a mission to help you fall in love with your work again. So grab a glass of wine, get ready to be coached, and tune in to your weekly boost of career confidence. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Recruit the Employer podcast. I am so thrilled to have my guest on today, Alex. She was my old boss, I guess you could say, when I used to work at the Muse. And so over the years, we've kind of talked about doing a podcast episode and never really happened. And so this is really a full circle moment for me personally to have her as a guest on the Recruit the Employer podcast. But this is actually one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. We talked about parenthood. We talked about systems. We talked about launching the Muse. We talked a little bit about some great career advice that she had. And luckily, we're on the same page about a lot of different things as it relates to career and job searching and thinking about your career in different seasons. We talked about that a lot. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to Alex, the co-founder of the Muse. And here's a really great conversation around what it's like to launch a startup. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Recruit the Employer podcast. I am super duper excited to have kind of a full circle moment for me. One of the co-founders of the Muse, Alex, is here today. So Alex, thank you so much for showing up and for coming. And this is just so fun. It's like old friends chatting.
It is. And it's been so great to see you sort of build your expertise in your business. And so getting a chance to join is so much fun for me too.
Yeah. Well, you guys gave me that opportunity. And so it's kind of, I've been thinking about this conversation a lot of just some of the things I want to chat about. But for those people who don't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Alex Cavalaucos. I'm one of the founders of the Muse. And we help people figure out what they want to do with their lives and how to get there. And we're the place for careers search and job search that's more values-based. So you can go and look for jobs and careers in companies that match what you're looking for, not just, a location or a job title, but, do they have parental leave? Are they environmentally friendly? And so for us, we're really trying to help people find the right spot for the next chapter in their career.
Yeah. And when did you found the Muse? When did you co-found the Muse?
10 years ago, which is
it's a decade. Oh my gosh. What does that feel like to say you've been a part of something for 10 years?
I think it definitely feels like a milestone this year, especially coming out of 2020 and that being such a transformative year for so many reasons, and for work as well, as we talk about a lot. But I think it's just been really wild to see something that was an idea and that for so long was so small and that we are sort of trying to make happen and like keeping alive, through blood, sweat, and tears, or blood, sweat, and ramen, as my co-founder Catherine and I joke, and to have it now be, a real lasting business that, has gone through a lot of transitions, but is here to stay. I think that's been really rewarding.
Do you feel like in the beginning you knew it was going to be successful, or were you like, I have no idea? Because we see the end, right? We don't see the beginning, and I think that's a really important part. Where I even get people like career coaches will come to me and like, oh my gosh, you have your dream business. I was like, let me tell you about my first year. So I'd love if you could kind of pull back the curtain to what you feel comfortable sharing. Like, what was that first year like of founding a company and thinking, oh yeah, we're going to make this happen? Like, what was going through your brain?
I think it's so interesting. I think that when you start something, you kind of have to simultaneously hold two things at once, which is this is really hard and it might not exist and it might not work, but also like, of course, this makes sense and we're going to make it happen. I think if you don't have that deep conviction, it's really hard to make it through those early years. And actually, it's even harder to get through those middle years, like 5, 6, 7 years in when it's still not total smooth sailing and you have new challenges. Like you need to have that real conviction this business needs to exist and that you want to be a part of it. But I think that the very early years were interesting for us because we had very quick market feedback in terms of our users, like users from the beginning loved what we did. They were
Well, I love what you did. I found y'all through Forbes 30 under 30 when I was working at the New York Stock Exchange. And I was like, this company is awesome. I'm going to look on here for jobs. And then somebody said, oh, Jenny, why don't you just apply there? So I can affirm that.
And there was such like passion and it's resonance with our users. And we could feel that. And we ourselves had been in those shoes of the people we were serving. And then at the same time, and especially in the early years, the investors we went to talk about didn't get it. And it was really interesting because if we didn't have that user conviction, we didn't have the growth in the user base, and if we weren't really sort of making that side of it work, I think we could have let those doubting voices sort of get to us a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Instead, it became a bit of a kind of a challenger mentality where we were like, you just don't get it. You're not job searching. You're not hiring in the same way. You don't understand these pain points. We do, and we'll show you, and we're going to keep growing, and you're going to see how it looks. And then years later, when we're serving 3 million people a month, 5 million people a month, now we're 7 to 8 million people a month, right? Mm-hmm. When we're at those numbers, back then those people didn't get it. They weren't our user base. And so I think that was one of the interesting things was balancing this. You want to hear the feedback, you want to listen to these signals, but you also have to have that conviction and look at the people you're serving. And if your users love what you're doing, then listen to them most of all.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like too, it's interesting you mentioned, our investors weren't our user base, which I feel like it's got to be really hard for founders just in general. The idea of convincing somebody, one, you're convincing people to be interested, the actual users. You're like, okay, that's working. But now the people that have to invest in this to make this run longer, I have to get them bought in as well. What was that process like? Because it was kind of like you were ahead of your time. Honestly, the Muse was ahead of its time in the ideas around employer branding. And for Recruit the Employer listeners, you have heard of the Muse. You've heard me talk about the Muse, whether from my own personal experience or just a recommendation of a place to go to. What do you feel like was the turning point in terms of people finally getting it, investors finally getting it?
What's funny is I think the turning point there were some people who always got it and some people who understood the space, and we have, certainly have investors who are like that, who just like it resonated. I think in some cases, it's really the numbers speaking for themselves. Right. When you say, look, we're growing this quickly in terms of users, or our revenue is growing like this, or our unit economics are really good. When you show that to people, it makes it easier to say, okay, I'm not the user, but clearly this is working for someone and they're serving the user base. But especially for, if anyone's thinking about doing a startup or they're in the early days of sort of a startup and thinking about more venture type funding versus running a business sort of self-funded. Sure. When you're in those modes, what's hard is I'm a true believer that early stage startup investing is essentially suspension of disbelief. Like there's a reason to say no to 100% of the pitches you hear. Like all of them have something you could point to and say, that's not going to work. Yeah. Every single one. And you have to have a moment where you say, yeah, I know, but I think it's going to work. And it's figuring out how you create that moment for someone. And I think it is easier for startups where the end user is an investor because they get the delight, the moment, I think about the first investors who must have invested in Uber, who downloaded an app and pushed a button and got into a car and said, I get it. Right? It's a lot easier when it's for you. Yeah. When you have a job and you're not job searching and you don't have any trouble getting people to apply for the, couple of jobs a year that you post at your really prestigious firm. This doesn't I don't get this. This doesn't resonate with me. I've always had, it's actually funny of how many people, especially during COVID specifically, how many people, I felt the weight of it more as a coach. I've always felt the weight of people transitioning jobs, and I'm sure you guys do as well over at the Muse, but how emotional that is. But last year specifically was just so emotional. And a site like the Muse is such a great safe haven for advice, for, am I even on the right track? What's happening? No one taught me how to do this. So when I know you were probably this idea came from your own experience. So tell us a little bit about the inception of the idea and how you and Catherine came together on that. Yeah, absolutely. So it was exactly that. It was having faced our own challenges and feeling like no one had taught us how to deal with them. And really, there was so much of our beginnings that was wanting to democratize access to information that would help people and also help them feel less alone. Because we realized so many people were going through the same challenges, the same questions. And so many folks, we graduated college, we both took a role at, a corporate company at a management consulting firm. And we really thought going in, this was our dream job. That's what you think. You're in college, you have your— this is my dream job. Yeah. And you show up. And within a month, it was actually really clear that was kind of role and kind of career that would be a good fit for me. And at the same time, that it was not a good fit for Catherine. And so we had all these conversations about how, okay, 6 weeks ago, we were gearing up to start this job, equally excited, equally sure this could be good for us. And it was so quickly clear it wasn't. Like, what did we miss? And we realized it wasn't on us and something that we'd missed, but it was the whole way that job search was structured, especially at the time. So little transparency into what a job's really like, no sense of what a company's actually like, what their culture is. And that it was really just a mismatch, right? Not that this place was a good company for me, or a good company or a bad company, but it was a good company for me and less of a good company for Catherine. And how do we help people navigate that? So that was part one, I think, of the inception. The second was, as Catherine realized that she was, not going to do this long term. She's okay, I'm going to give it two years. I signed up for this, initial contract. And after that, what should I do next? And so she started doing what we jokingly called fantasy job searching. Not applying, but I'm looking to see what I would apply to next.
Yes.
Ready. Because she didn't know what she wanted to do. And the sites were terrible. They were hard to use. The search results were bad. They didn't give enough information. So there was that whole experience.
Most sites are still like that, to be honest.
Really bad. I mean, it's better. Trust me, it's better than it
better.
Was.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like, is this the best the internet can do? Like, this is wild that this is what we think the best is, that, we can like order Seamless. So, Seamless, I think, was launching at the time.
Yeah.
But you can't like find a job more easily. And then the last piece for me, so I was getting promoted. I started managing it was maybe not even 2 years after college. I started managing someone who was 10 years older than me, had been a professor at a university. And I never managed before. And I was thrown into this. It was their first project. And I was like, where do I go? Where do I turn? I started looking for career advice and it wasn't very good. There's a lot better advice there now than there was at the time, but I didn't know who to ask. I didn't know where to turn. And it felt like there were things I just needed to be taught. And if I could have those tips and tricks and, something to guide me through it, it would be so helpful. So there's those different pieces, the company culture piece, the job search experience, and the career advice. And we realized that there's nowhere that had all of those things.
No.
There were job boards and there were publications. And that was actually one of the biggest points of pushback we got for the first 3 years of business was
really
either do jobs or do articles, but don't do both. And we're like, you don't get it. That's the whole thing. People need both. They need the guidance as they figure out what they want to do. So that's sort of where we started. And honestly, that's where we've continued. Like, that's where our heart is. The mission has stayed very, very consistent, even as we've evolved the product and our offerings to want to really help people figure out what they want to do next. And that's different for every 3 to 5 year time horizon. You have different chapters, different priorities. And every time we want to be there so that people can get the advice they need and find the right role for them.
I love that. And I think what's interesting for people that are listening is you talked about you both had a different perspective on the same company. And I talk to people a lot about that, where this company may be really good for you and that company might be really bad for somebody else. Like, I have a dear friend who was also in a management consulting role, loved being in that environment. I was like, I would die if I was in management. Like, it's just not my personality type. I wouldn't have thrived there. And so I love that you guys both were able to acknowledge, like, I enjoy this, but I don't have this advice that I need on how to accelerate. And I don't enjoy, and Catherine said, I really don't enjoy this. I don't really know what to do next. So
yeah, what I think is so funny, and I use this analogy all the time, is work is a human thing. Right? Like, obviously it's a company and there's jobs, but you're interacting with people. And there's a company culture is all about how people interact with each other. It's a very, very human, very personal thing. And for some reason, people treat it like it's this black and white,
It's not transactional.
Yeah, it's not. And what's funny is that, the comparison I always make is with online dating.
Yeah.
You could take two people who are the same height and have the same hair color and the same age, and like, they're not going to want to date the same person.
Yeah.
Why would someone with my major and my background wouldn't necessarily want to work for the same company?
So good.
So, I adore my husband. He's perfect for me, although he is not perfect.
Yes.
Nor am I.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't be the right person for my best friend or my sister or someone who looks like me. He just happens to be right for my set of priorities and the things that matter to me that are like deal breakers. Like he has. And the things that are imperfect about him, I'm totally okay with, and vice versa. And like, it's really about that fit. And you would never imagine a best, New Yorker to marry list, right? Like, for who? But you have these best companies to work for list as if it's a universal thing. So I think that's what's really interesting to me.
Yeah. And I think candidates really need to pay attention. So y'all listening need to pay attention to what are your values and being really clear about that. And the Muse actually helped me before I worked for you guys, discern what did I actually want in my career, what was important to me. And then that helped to make the process, when you get clarity, then it's a lot easier to navigate the changes and to do like a process of elimination. So like when I know and have an idea of generally what's interesting to me, generally what strengths I have, I can then lean towards the companies that align with that. Would you agree that that's how people use the site too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that self-knowledge is a step a lot of people miss, right? The same thing with dating. If you go out and date and you're trying to impress them,
right,
all of a sudden you're like, wow, are these the right people for me? You're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Versus saying, this is what I'm looking for in a relationship. This is who I stand for. This is what I want out of life. I wonder if that person's complementary to what I want. And also, yes, of course, I want to impress them on a first date, but you're looking at both sides of it, right? It's not just one directional. And so a lot of people go into these job interviews really wanting to impress them and, get the job without thinking about if they want the job.
Right. And yes. It's like, do I actually want this thing that I'm trying really hard to get? We talk about that all the time in our program.
Have you done the research to figure out whether you want it? And then the amazing thing about it, and this is true of all relationships, but it definitely in job search, is if you have clarity on why you want the role, you actually perform way better in interviews because
1,000 times.
Clarity on why you're a good fit, why you care. They can feel that you're less desperate in how you present yourself. And it's just like, it fits in a different way. And people feel that on both sides. So I think it's so fascinating, but career values, absolutely. And knowing what you're prioritizing right now in your life. There's no shame in saying, right now, what I need is stability and as high of an income as possible because I have student loans and I'm supporting my family and I need that. Or you could say, I'm young, I'm fortunate, I've paid off my loans, I want to travel, I want flexibility because maybe later in my life, I don't know if I'll get a chance to do that. I'm prioritizing a job, even if it pays less, that gives me that option. Those are equally valid choices, but they're your choices. You've got to know what you're looking for. And you can't get it all, same as with a partner. So think about what matters.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's important what you talked there about the different seasons of life. And I think we live in this world now where I get this a lot of pushback from clients or people on LinkedIn. They'll say, well, that's not my dream job, or but I really need to make all this money. I'm like, well, it's okay at this season. Like you need to prioritize status quo. That's okay. You don't have to be pushing 24/7 your whole entire career. It may be a season where you need to step back and focus on your family because stuff's going on. That's a totally valid, strategic, right career choice for you in the season. And then there may be a season in the future where you're like, I'm going for that promotion and I am pushing and I'm going to work and I'm doing the thing. But it's acknowledging that we have different seasons in life and it's okay to do both.
Absolutely. Yeah, different seasons in life. And also you should be doing it for yourself.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of times, and this happens more early in your career, but it happens all the time where you're like, I'm doing it. And you realize it's because you're trying to keep up with the Joneses or impress your parents or
that's a big one.
Right. Or after college, all your friends were going to startups. So you went to a startup, but you didn't stop to think about how you love structure and you hate ambiguity. And now you're miserable. Right. And so really making sure you're doing it for yourself and that you know what you're looking for. Different seasons call for different things. If if you have children or if you're a partner, you also have to think about your seasons within sort of the unit that you're a part of. Sometimes in 2020 was that for a lot of people. Saying, what do we need to do to get through this year? And how do we balance what everyone wants and how we get there? So there's not only no shame in that, but if someone knows that they have a dream job, not everyone does, but if someone knows they have a dream job and this role isn't it, I think figuring out how do you get yourself one step closer? How do you get one experience that's going to get you closer to that role or a skill set you didn't have before that's needed to get that dream job? That is part of, I think, what helps rationalize to yourself and feel good about a decision that fits your season, but still edges you towards that dream job.
Yeah. We call that over here the quarter turn. Just make a quarter turn. That's all you need to do. You don't need to do the 180 because it feels really overwhelming to be like, my dream job's all the way over here and I'm here and there's so much space in between. Just make a quarter turn. That's all you need to do.
I love the quarter turn. And also it helps honestly with hiring managers to understand it better, right? If you try to do 180, people don't always have that depth of vision to be able to see how far you're coming.
Yeah. Y'all were gracious enough to hire me with my 180 turn from finance to sales. And I remember at the time, Doug, who was in charge of the sales team, he said, you seem like you really like the New York Stock Exchange. Why do you want to leave? And I was like, great point. Well, I really love it because I went through my whole list of things, but he had vision, which I was so grateful for. Y'all had vision to let me make that 180 turn, but you're absolutely correct. Not every hiring manager could have that vision. or has that need too. And to be fair, like y'all might have not wanted me to come and be a part of that. and that would be totally fair too, because in that instance, it is like, what's the best fit for your team? What's the best fit for me? And making sure that that collaborates well. One thing I want to touch on that you were kind of briefly talking about with different seasons. Now you're a mom, right? Mm-hmm. So mom to Eloise and Juliet, right? Juliet's second baby soon. So how has your career changed, or like your career view changed since motherhood? Has it changed? And that's a question we often ask women. And I try to ask my men on the podcast too, how has, fatherhood changed you? But I'd love to hear your perspective as some of the people that are listening maybe are entering into that season of motherhood or in the thick of it right now, or know it's in the future, but like myself, but I don't know what that's going to look like. And I don't know how I'm going to feel. So I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think parenthood is something that, it certainly changes, just like any large sort of change in your life. But I think it's one of the sort of larger, more permanent changes you make, because it's just this, all of a sudden you have your, all of your time, all of your control of what you're doing. And all of a sudden you're responsible for a little human that will die if you don't take care of it, right? So it's a big change overnight. And also no one trains you on how to do it. So there's a lot of things that happen, go on at that point. And I think what's interesting to me is that before kids, Monday to Friday, I'd be like, I'm working so hard. And I, work weekends a little bit. There was a Muse in my own company, but on the weekend I was like, now I get to relax.
Yeah.
And parents will tell you this. You have your weekend alone with your kids full time. I have 2 kids under 4, and then on Monday I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. I can sit down, I can have a quiet coffee in the middle of the day. Like, gosh, I love my work. It makes me appreciate different things about work.
Yeah.
But I do think, it gives you a lot of clarity. I think there's a lot of people think they know how they'll feel on the other side. And often you have a good sense of yourself, but a lot can change. You can have, a child that has more sort of needs, health needs or other needs when they're small. You can yourself, have postpartum depression or anxiety. Like there's a lot of things that can happen in a career that can also happen in your personal life. And so for me, I think what parenthood has done is both really made me appreciate sort of my choice of partner and how we communicated really well beforehand about what we wanted, what that would look like. My husband, Anthony, took 3 months parental leave for our first child. We took it together. Yeah. And having that time together meant that parenting wasn't a me thing, right? Mm-hmm. And even to this day, he's the last one to put them to bed.
Right. Because you're true partners in that.
And we found there's things we prefer to do and things, but we have a rhythm. The monitor used to be next to his bed when she was 2 months old. Well, now that we have a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, it's still on his side of the bed. Like there's things that you do early on that you sort of set this trajectory. And so the fact that we had that time, that we set that partnership, I think has made it a lot easier for me as someone who wants to have a career and continue to work and be a working parent. And he's, also wants to work and be a working parent. So I think that's one thing. And then work-wise, I think it definitely helped, I think, for us to have a perspective going through the pandemic of having one of the founders with children, because we have a lot of parents at the Muse, and just the sheer, when COVID arrived in the US and we locked down the office, I was probably about 6 months pregnant, maybe a little less. I now have a 1-year-old. There's a lot.
Wow, that's crazy.
And having to sort of go through all that and feeling for and understanding what it really meant for parents who needed flexibility in that particular season that we were all going through when schools closed and the pandemic. I think really impacted also my work this past year and how I was able to support the team. But more broadly, I think for people who aren't parents, I think there's there's assumptions about what people who work with you or for you who have children are doing or have their priorities that aren't always right. And then there's things you totally miss. And it's funny, I feel like I have a better perspective. I'm probably a more empathetic manager for non-parents, to just be like, just the sheer amount of things you don't control. But to go back a little bit to your original question, for people who are thinking about it, I think what has made it certainly helpful for me is I've applied the same, I don't know if rigor is the right term, but I've applied a similar mentality to parenthood as I do to work, which is I like to be prepared.
Sure.
I like to have systems that work for me. And so as a result, there's things that are unpredictable and that you can't do, can't figure out. But also when I schedule pediatrician appointments in a lot of advance, way in advance, I can put the time slot I want that doesn't mess up my schedule for work.
Yeah.
So where are the things that I do that just make life easier for myself by not letting it be hectic? all the time. And you can actually make it a lot less hectic than you'd think.
Mm.
And then the rest of it is your kids. And I have two.
You're like, and then the rest we can't control. So we can only control what we can control.
I like really control what I can control. And then the rest of it, I'm like, I have two strong-willed daughters. Like,
yeah, it is what it is. I love the idea of, I actually was just talking to another parent the other day, and they were saying that the systems that they put in place, they need their systems in order to effectively keep their job, basically. And I never really thought of that because my brain is not typically a systems brain. I'm much more of a creative visionary, kind of all over the place. Bless my husband. But I love the idea of, I'm like, I need to get friendly with systems in this next season of life, because I do realize that even as we just, added just the two of us, and then we added a dog into the mix, and that sounds so dramatic, but it's like, oh, you actually have to juggle now. Who's taking care of the dog? Who's doing this? Like, we are not communicating well right now. And so getting on the same page. Yes. It's even something so simple as that. I can imagine the magnitude once you get 1, 2, 3 plus children in the mix, it gets a little bit complex.
It's finding things that work for you and your personality type and your partner's personality type. But I think I'll give my plug of the 3 things.
Yes, really, please. We love lists here.
my three things for someone trying to organize their life around children. 1, have a joint email for your family.
We actually write these down.
We did the same for our wedding, which is like, here's a wedding email, because otherwise, as many people know, vendors just magically drop the fiance off, and then all of a sudden the woman's the only one planning. It's like, I can't plan 100% for a wedding. We're doing this together. So by having a joint email, we could both log in. We both had all the info. Anyone could answer. It just made it possible to share it. Like, my husband wanted to help, but if you don't have the information, you can't. And so that worked so well for our wedding that we did the same thing. We have a family email, and that's where our pediatrician, any schools or daycares, all of the things that are like truly family, even like utilities, our rent, like our lease, all of that, all go to that email. Everything else we keep separate. It's not about like personal correspondence or friends, but we use it for all the logistical stuff, which means we can both always look up what was the confirmation for this? Did we pay the bill for the pediatrician? It's not on one person 100% of the time, even if I tend to be the person to do the pediatrician appointments. Well, if it's a busy month, my husband has everything he needs to do it.
Right.
So that was one thing, is like having all the information in one place that we can both access. The second is a joint calendar. So we can toggle it on with our work calendar and see days our nanny is off, where our daycare was closed, when our offices are closed.
Right.
When our parents are coming in or out of town pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Pediatrician appointments, someone's birthday, like all those things are on the joint calendar. And I may be the one who's more likely to add stuff to it, but then he has the information. He can say, oh yeah, our nephew's birthday's next week. Did we get a present?
Right.
But if he doesn't see it, he won't have that trigger to think about it, and it will always be on me. So it gives you
so good
to share the work. And then the third thing for us, and this isn't for everyone, but we have a shared to-do like app. We use Todoist. There's a lot of different ones.
Yeah, we have that one too.
Yeah. And having one, like we have recurring stuff, we have a financial one, and there's literally a recurring like pay rent for the first of every month. And like, you can assign it, you can put dates, and it lets you not have to, like, for a lot of partnerships, there's usually at least one person, it's often the woman, but not always, who's like, feels like they're the nag. Did you do this, all that?
Sure.
This lets you put it out there, and like, they have all the information of what needs to get done. There's some weeks where I'll be like, I honestly don't care what you do, but can you knock some things off the list?
Yes. Yes.
And see what he has energy for, what
right.
he feels like in the right headspace to do, and vice versa. We do an annual reminder to buy presents for every important person in our family, our parents, all that. And so all of my side of the family, 2 weeks before the birthday, they'll be like, buy parents for my mom, buy presents for my dad. Same for his side. Because all of a sudden, oh my gosh, did you know it's June right now?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was June. Guess whose birthday's in June? My father-in-law. Guess who got a reminder last week to get a present? My husband. Amazing. I didn't have to do anything. So that's one. And even things like groceries. We have a grocery list on to-do list. So when we run out of stuff, we add it. Whoever's at the store doesn't have to ask. We just get whatever's on the list. So it's a lot of like removing the barriers of asking and checking, and I don't have the info, and so I had to wait. Like, it just makes sure you have the ability to help the way you want in the way that's best for you. So anyway, that's my 3 little productivity.
I love that. Honestly, I literally just wrote that. I actually never do this in an interview. I usually just listen back later, but I wrote those down to tell my husband today of like, this is what we need to do. Because the reality is when you have all those things in your brain, it's going to clog up your brain, whether you think that it is or not. And I'm definitely of the mindset of like, oh, I'll just figure it out when but I am bogged down by it. And then I get overwhelmed and then I get shut down and I can't figure out what I need to do next.
And there's more and more, especially as you've shared, but even before, we set a lot of these systems up beforehand. It takes it out of your brain, which removes your stress, and it gives your partner access to it. Because I think there's also a lot of times where you're like, why did you do this? Like, I didn't know that had to happen. It's like, well, why didn't you think of it? I've been thinking about it for 3 days.
Yes.
And so now if I think of something needs to get done, I just add it to the list on my phone. I don't have to do it right away. Like, it gives me an immediate action. I know I won't forget it and I can move on and do other things. So
I love that. That's such great advice and just ways to be thinking. So if you're a parent who's listening to this and you're thinking, okay, how am I going to do this in this next season of life? Or what are some key tips? I love those tips. I think those are excellent. But as we're wrapping up our time together, I'd love to hear what's some advice that you wish you would have gotten earlier in your career? I know that for myself, one of the big things that I wish that I knew was to pay attention to my strengths. Because I think I spent so much time trying to please everybody else and not really focusing and doubling down on the things I was good at. I was trying to fix so much of what I was naturally bad at, not things I should get better at. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your, career advice that you wish your earlier self heard?
I think one of the best piece of advice I got is actually when I was leaving the consulting firm to start the Muse. As I was pretty sure I wanted to do it, but I went to a lot of people I really respected there. I had good relationships. I've been working with them.
Yeah.
I obviously got mixed feedback. Some were like, go for it. Some were like, you're making a mistake. You've got a career here. And I was like sort of weighing all of this equally. Someone I worked with, my name's Geraldine, she's fantastic. And she told me, look, there are almost all the advice you're going to get in life falls into one of two buckets. Either do what I did or do what's best for me right now. And people don't realize it's what they're doing. When I talked to someone who was a partner at a consulting firm about leaving, and they said, no, you should stay. You've got a career here. You could make partner. That's what they did. They are justifying to themselves deep down their choice to stay. Maybe they made their own decision not to leave multiple times and they feel good about that decision. So they want me to have the same decision, but I'm not the same person.
Right.
You also get the flip side of that, which is the regret. I didn't do it. I remember one person saying, I didn't do it when I got the chance. And now I've got, 3 houses, 2 mortgages and 4 kids. And like, I'm stuck here forever. Like, go.
That's a terrifying statement from somebody.
And so there was an element of like, and then there's someone else who said, no, you should stay. And you know what? Me staying would make life easier for them. I was on their team. The client trusted me to find someone else and train them up. Good. And so it just helped me put a little bit of distance between the advice I got, which was helpful. And I, percolated, let it sort of simmer, but I sort of let the decision be internal and be mine and not be an average of other people's opinions or not be the opinion of someone I really respected because maybe they were giving it to me for different reasons. And it's not nefarious, but it's very human. It's human to want to justify or make things work in your own world. And so the advice can never be totally impartial. And so that for me, I think was just really formative advice at a moment I needed it. And I think I've actually kept that through the rest of my career, which, in a lot of decisions I've made, I just have a deep inner conviction when I'm sure.
Discernment.
I know it and I will hear other perspectives and I will listen and I will think about it, but I don't need someone else to tell me my decision's okay. I think that's something a lot of people wait for, whether it's to quit a job, to take a job, to start something, versus saying this feels right for who I am, for my values, for the season in my life, for what I need. And I feel at peace with it. Like, I feel like it's given me peace in my decision-making to not feel like other people's opinions matter more than my own. Yeah.
We say here, go where the peace is. That's my big phrase is even when I was leaving the Muse and starting the business kind of full time, it was a peaceful, I knew that there was peace behind it. And any decision that I kind of made thus far has been, okay, is this going to bring me more peace or more stress? And sometimes, there's stress involved with a peaceful decision, right? Obviously, but it's really going, where does that inner conviction is? What's that discernment behind it? And I love that you have affirmed everything we've already talked about on here. Final question for you today. We love to ask, I think it's really important, and not enough people celebrate the things that they do well in their job. They just think about what are the things that I'm doing bad and not thinking, hey, that failure could be a positive thing. But I would love to hear from you. What is perhaps a work win or something that you've done really well this week that you're proud of? Trying to get more people excited and just owning what they're good at in a matter-of-fact way.
So my work win this week, actually a good one for me. So I do a decent amount of presentations in the company, outside the company, et cetera. And I've gotten good at doing them last minute, which is good and bad.
Yeah.
And so the work win this week is that I have a presentation I'm giving on Thursday that I finished yesterday.
Oh, that's so
never happened. And it feels good to, for once, not me Wednesday night being like, oh, right, I need to finish this up. Not that it would be stressful, but like, I feel very like, I grounded my week by doing it on the Monday. So I feel very, very happy about that.
I love it. I love when things get done earlier than you anticipated, because I'm definitely can lean into the procrastination a little bit too much myself. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of the Recruit the Employer podcast. It has taken way too long. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or the Muse? Where can they connect?
Yes, absolutely. So the Muse, we're at themuse.com. Very easy for job searching, themuse.com/jobs. Very easy. Join us. We've got a great newsletter. We're on social as well. But we've got career advice. We've got jobs. You can look inside companies, hear from employees, and see videos of the company or pictures of the office. And we've got career coaches, including Jena, if you go to our coaching platform as well. But more importantly, we are there with so many free resources to help you through pretty much any question you could be going through. So don't hesitate to come check us out there. And then for me, probably the best place to find me is on Twitter for those people who are there at ACAV, ACAV. And I look forward to seeing many of you listeners on the interwebs. But thank you for having me. This is so fun. So great to get a chance to catch up and connect and to talk to someone who loves careers as much as I do.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. And friends, we will see you next week on the Recruit the Employer podcast. Thanks for listening to the Recruit the Employer podcast. If you've been loving this podcast and it's been helping you approach your career in a brand new way, I have two shameless asks. Number one, make sure you hit subscribe right this very second. That way you won't miss a single episode. And number two, would you give us a review? Reviews help other ambitious career women like you know that this podcast is the place to be and helps the podcast climb to the top of the charts. Think of it as some good career karma. And as always, if you want to learn more about the topics we discussed today or are ready to take massive action and invest in yourself and your career, we would be honored to help you. Head on over to recruittheemployer.com/call to book your free strategy session. Regardless, we will see you next week.